Part 1. Echoes in the Static. The hum was the first thing you noticed. It wasn't a sound so much as a presence, a low-frequency vibration that permeated the very concrete of starlight dynamics. It was the song of the quantum mainframe, the ceaseless whisper of 1 billion calculations per nanosecond, the heartbeat of a corporation that built chariots for the stars. Within the cathedral-like expanse of the main engineering floor, under vaulted ceilings and crisscrossing gantries, the future was being assembled from polished chrome and raw ambition. And amidst the gleaming hardware and self-assured engineers, Elara Vance was a dissonant chord. At 32, she possessed the profound weariness of someone much older. A quiet fatigue had settled into the lines around her dark eyes, eyes that saw too much and said too little. Her regulation-gray jumpsuit, stained with the indelible inks of hydro-lubricants and conductive sealants, hung loosely on her frame, a constant reminder that she didn't quite fit, not in the clothes, not in the world. To her colleagues, she was a ghost in the machine, a curiosity they had nicknamed the algorithm. The moniker was born of her unnerving talent. She could diagnose a failing system with an almost supernatural intuition, tracing catastrophic failures back to their source with a few quiet keystrokes. She spoke only in the precise, sterile language of schematics, her voice a flat monotone that betrayed no hint of the mind behind it. She was respected for her results, but her silence made people uncomfortable. She was an anomaly, a human black box. Her current purgatory was the Orion 9, a long-range deep space probe that was both a marvel and a nightmare. For 3 months, it had been a graveyard for the reputations of senior engineers. It was plagued by a series of inexplicable, cascading failures that defied conventional diagnostics. Now, the cursed machine belonged to Elara. "The board is asking for a progress report, Alistair." CEO Marcus Reed's voice was a sharp edge over the comms in Dr. Alistair Finch's immaculate office. "The investors are getting nervous about the Orion 9. It's 3 months behind schedule and 20 million credits over budget. What do I tell them?" Dr. Finch, head of propulsion systems, straightened his tie. He was a man of sharp angles and sharper opinions, a celebrated academic whose portrait hung in the theoretical physics wing of the Lunar Academy. He strode out of his office, his long legs carrying him swiftly towards the assembly bay. He would force the issue. He would break the algorithm and find a solution or prove she was nothing more than a clever trickster. He found her kneeling beside the probe, her back to him, her focus absolute. "Miss Vance," he began, his voice laced with the condescension that had become their primary mode of communication. "Given your unique success rate, I have devised a small test to gauge the true scope of your abilities." 2 technicians wheeled over a dust-covered relic on an anti-grav pallet, a vintage Voyager navigation array, decades old. Finch's smirk was triumphant. He had spent the previous night personally sabotaging the device with 6 complex interwoven failures. "Let's see the algorithm in action," he announced to the gathering engineers. "No diagnostics, no power, just your intuition." Elara looked from the abused machine to Finch's smug face. She felt a familiar cold knot tighten in her gut, but her expression remained impassive. This was the game. She had to play it to be left alone to do the real work, the quiet penance that defined her life. She rose and ran her scarred, knowing hands over the array's casing. The bay fell silent. "The gravitational compensator is misaligned by 3.4 degrees, she stated, her voice clear and steady. The flux capacitor shows resonance decay consistent with prolonged deep void radiation exposure. Chronometer chips corrupted. Signal relays have hairline fractures. She paused, her eyes distant. And there's a microfracture in the primary power conduit that your own diagnostic missed. She looked up at him. You sabotaged it with 6 layered faults. There are 9. Then came the words that would echo through the corporation. The problem is not the array, doctor. The problem is you. She turned her back on him, her dismissal absolute, leaving him to stew in a silence so profound that it felt like an accusation. High up on the observation deck, Director Anya Petrova lowered her binoculars, her heart pounding. She had served 7 years as a command pilot. She knew the legends, the whispers of a navigator so gifted she could feel the warps in space-time, a ghost who could guide a crippled ship home through an asteroid field in total darkness, a commander who had vanished after a mission went catastrophically wrong. Anya looked at the silent woman below, then at her secure datapad displaying a heavily redacted file. Call sign, Orion. Survivor of Operation Crimson Void. Commander, Elara Vance. My God, Anya whispered to the empty room. It's really her. Anya Petrova's investigation had been a quiet, personal crusade for weeks. It started with the anomalous reports, but it was solidified by the small details that screamed interstellar command. The way Elara maintained perfect balance, the way she instinctively checked exits and angles, the way her eyes scanned the gantries above, not with curiosity, but for threats. Anya had pulled the personnel files for every ex-command member on staff. Most were in security or logistics. But one name stood out, Dr. Kai Thorne, Senior Software Architect. His file was as bland and constructed as Elara's, but the name was a ghost from the same report, K.I.A., Darius Thorne. Kai was his brother. Anya began to watch them both. She saw their silent communication, a ballet of coded language disguised as technical jargon. "Did you resolve the resonance issue in the mainframe's cooling system?" Kai asked Elara one day as they passed in a corridor. "Negative," Elara replied without breaking stride. "The oscillations are periodic. I've implemented a temporary buffer, but a permanent solution requires a full system flush." Translation: "Are you okay?" "No, the pressure is building. I'm holding on, but I need a break." She saw Kai leave a specific brand of high-protein nutrient bar, a rare import from the Martian colonies, notoriously favored by deep space navigators, on Elara's empty workstation late one night. She saw him subtly reroute a hazardous diagnostic away from Elara's queue, assigning it to a drone instead. He was her guardian, her silent overwatch, a one-man support network, a ghost protecting a ghost. Anya decided to risk contact. She found Kai in a deserted simulation room, running a diagnostic. "Dr. Thorne," she began, keeping her voice casual. "I was reviewing old mission reports from my time in the service. I came across Operation Crimson Void." Kai's fingers froze on his console for a barest fraction of a second. "A tragedy," he said, his voice perfectly even. "Before my time. Your brother, Darius," Anya pressed gently. "He served with Commander Vance, Orion. They say she was the best." Kai turned slowly, his eyes analytical, searching. "My brother was a good soldier. He believed in his commander. He believed in the mission. His loss must have been difficult," Anya said, her voice full of empathy she truly felt. "Loss is the cost of progress, Director," Kai replied, his mask of professional detachment firmly in place. "Starlight Dynamics knows that better than anyone." He turned back to his console, the conversation clearly over. But Anya had seen it, the flicker of profound pain in his eyes. The network was real. Her mind reeled with the implications. She had a living legend, a war hero with profound PTSD, being systematically harassed by a department head who was in turn being eaten alive by his own unresolved grief over the same incident. And CEO Marcus Reed only cared about the bottom line. It was a time bomb. The Voyager Array incident was the explosion. After Elara's public humiliation of Finch, Anya knew she had to act. She strode onto the gantry, her heart pounding, and spoke the name that hadn't been uttered at Starlight for 5 years. Commander Vance. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. The salutes from the ex-command personnel. Finch's utter collapse. Kai Thorne stepping from the shadows to stand by Elara's side, revealing his own mark, his own vigil. But it was Finch's confession, whispered through tears, that shattered the room. Darius was my best friend. I hated you because he died, and you lived. Elara looked at the broken man on the floor, and for the first time, the icy shield around her heart cracked. She didn't see a tormentor. She saw another victim of Crimson Void, another soul haunted by the ghosts of the Vela Nebula. The escape pod's hatch is sealed. Through the tiny viewport, Elara watches the Ares 9, her ship, her home, being torn apart by enemy fire. Kalen's last words echo in her ears. Go, live. In her hands is the ship's log, containing the proof, the unacknowledged engineering flaw in the life support system that had killed Anya Sharma when her console exploded. Her pod is small, cold, and silent. She is alone, utterly alone in the deep, indifferent dark. For 3 days she drifts, the silence broken only by her own ragged breathing and the recorded screams from the final moments of the battle. She doesn't sleep, she just floats. The names of her crew a mantra of failure on her lips. Kalen, Anya, Darius. It is a pain so vast that it has no sound, a grief that hollows her out until all that is left is the promise she made to a dead man. The memory receded. Elara looked at CEO Reed, who had arrived with his entourage, his face a mask of political calculation. He saw a problem, but also an opportunity. Commander, we need you. And in that moment, Elara's purpose, her penance, shifted. It was no longer enough to quietly fix machines. She had to fix the culture that broke them. On my terms, she said, her voice resonating with a newfound authority. No publicity. And Dr. Finch, he is not my assistant. He is my first student.
The Extreme Resilience Engineering program was Elara's crucible, and she forged it in the fire of her own experience. It was held in Hangar 7, a decommissioned facility far from the polished main building, a place that still smelled of ozone and grit. Her first lesson was silence. For 3 hours, the 12 candidates, along with a humbled Alastair Finch, sat in a simulated cockpit adrift. No alarms, no system failures, just the vast, empty blackness outside the viewports and the low hum of the life support. This is your greatest enemy, Elara's voice finally came over the comms. Not the asteroid field, not the enemy fighter, the silence, the void. It will eat your sanity if you let it. Your training is not about mastering the machine. It is about mastering the void inside yourself. Talk to me, Rostova. What are you thinking? Ava Rostova, the brilliant young engineer, was startled. I'm running through emergency protocols in my head, Commander. Wrong, Elara said. You're thinking about work. You're hiding. Think about the taste of real coffee. Think about your brother's stupid jokes. Anchor yourself. The machine doesn't need your soul. Your crew does. Her next test was a Kobayashi Maru, a moral dilemma with no right answer. A crippled science vessel and a transport full of colonists were both caught in a stellar nursery's gravitational tide. They had one tractor beam, enough power for one rescue. What are your orders, Candidate Chen? Elara asked. Chen, a logical and precise engineer, began calculating. The science vessel contains 6 xenobotanists with invaluable research. The colonist transport holds 150 people, but they are non-essential personnel. Logically, the loss of the research is a greater detriment. They are not non-essential personnel, Chen. They are people, Finch interrupted, his voice passionate. You save the most lives. It's the only humane choice. There is no humane choice, Doctor, Elara countered, her voice calm. There is only the choice you can live with. Both are losing scenarios. The test is not about who you save. It is about how you lead the ones you've condemned to their deaths. How do you give them a good death? How do you face the families of the ones you sacrificed? That is the job. The engineering is the easy part. Finch and Elara debated for an hour in front of the candidates, their opposing views, Finch's newfound humanism versus Elara's stark pragmatism, became the program's defining philosophical pillar. The final exam was a 36-hour continuous repair simulation. Hangar 7 became a hellscape of screaming alarms, simulated plasma fires, and cascading system failures. The candidates were pushed beyond exhaustion, forced to rely on each other, their training, and their sheer will to survive. At the 24-hour mark, Eva Rostova collapsed from exhaustion, her hands shaking too much to hold a plasma welder. Chen, her partner, was near his breaking point. Finch, without a word, stepped into the simulation, took the welder from Eva's hands, and began expertly sealing a conduit. "I'll handle the hardware, Miss Rostova," he said gently. "You guide me. Your mind, my hands. We are a team." Elara watched from the control room, a flicker of something like pride in her eyes. Kai stood beside her. "Darius would be proud of him," Kai said quietly. "Darius would have never let him get so lost in the first place," Elara replied. But there was no malice in her voice. When the simulation ended, the hangar was silent, save for the ragged breathing of the exhausted survivors. 3 candidates had passed: Eva, Chen, and one other. But all 12, and Finch, had been transformed. They had faced the void and found an anchor, not in the machines, but in each other.
As predicted, the story of the Ghost Navigator leaked, but by the time the media descended, Elara Vance was gone. She left a single, unsigned challenge coin on Finch's desk. Etched on it were the coordinates of the stellar memorial in the Vela Nebula, an invitation, a responsibility. Finch took over the program, co-teaching with a now-promoted Eva Rostova. He became its fiercest defender, a man redeemed not by forgiveness, but by purpose. When his niece graduated from the academy, he was the one who pinned her wings on her uniform. "Your Uncle Darius was a hero," he told her, his voice thick with emotion. "But the greatest commander he ever knew taught me that heroism isn't about dying for a cause. It's about living for one. Be wise, be strong, and anchor yourself to something real." Anya Petrova rose to become CEO of Starlight Dynamics, forever changing its corporate culture. Competence, resilience, and humanity became the new metrics for success. And Kai Thorne continued to manage the Ghost Foundation, the silent, invisible network that funded scholarships, built trauma centers for returning explorers, and ensured that no soldier of the void would ever be left to fight their demons alone. Years later, a deep space exploration vessel, the Odyssey, captained by Eva Rostova, suffered a catastrophic engine failure in an uncharted nebula. They were stranded, their communications fried, their life support failing. As panic began to set in, Eva remembered a lesson from a quiet woman in a dusty hangar. She opened a comm channel to the entire ship. "This is Captain Rostova," she said, her voice a calm anchor in the storm of fear. "I want to tell you a story. It's about a navigator named Orion and the promise she made to a dead man." As she spoke, Her hands flew across the navigation console, her mind working furiously. She saw a flicker, a gravitational anomaly, a path no one else would see, a path that felt familiar. It was an impossible, dangerous maneuver, a slingshot around a black hole that defied all conventional logic, a move straight out of the legends of the Ghost of Orion. She took a breath and gave the order. Far away, at a silent memorial floating in the endless night, Elara Vance watched 3 beacons pulse in a steady, rhythmic cadence. She had just completed her diagnostics. The beacons were strong. The names of her crew were polished. Her promise was kept. Suddenly, her long-range sensors picked up a faint, distorted signal, a ship's transponder, broadcasting from the other side of the nebula. It was the Odyssey. It was on a trajectory she recognized, a path she had blazed a lifetime ago. A rare, genuine smile touched Elara's lips. Kai stood beside her, watching the signal on the screen. "It looks like one of yours," he said. "They're all ours, Kai," she replied, her gaze fixed on the distant stars. They always were. The ghost was no longer a solitary figure of grief. Her legacy was a living network, a constellation of souls she had saved, taught, and inspired. Her work was written not in history books, but in the light of ships navigating safely home, in the quiet strength of leaders who chose compassion over cruelty, and in the enduring promise that even in the deepest, darkest void, no one is ever truly alone.